and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. So this week on the Jazz Update, it's all about saxophonist Ben Webster. Ben Webster's playing style was hallmarked by his unique saxophone melodies and innovativeness. So Ben Webster initially started out playing the violin, then took up saxophone under Lester Young's tutelage. He switched to tenor saxophone as a teenager, and then began touring and performing alongside Fletcher Henderson, Benny Carter, and others. He started developing a unique saxophone style based on Coleman Hawkins' style. Ben Webster joined Duke Ellington's band for a while, where he became famous for his ballad playing. Also, some of his best hits with the Ellington Orchestra include Cottontail, Chelsea Bridge, Blue Surge, and more. After he left the orchestra, he began touring solo and alongside other ensembles. One of them was a stint with Art Tatum. So that was a quick insight into the life and times and best hits of Ben Webster. More details coming up. Also coming up, some trending festival and album news. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Ben Webster, his life and times and best hits. And during this hour, we're going to be talking about his biography. He was known as one of the greatest tenor saxophonists of his time. His mentors included Coleman Hawkins and Lester Young. His saxophone style was characteristic. He would typically play very intensely, and on love songs he was soft and nostalgic. So Ben Webster started out playing the piano originally, and then switched to saxophone in his teens. He toured in local bands and orchestras including Fletcher Henderson's orchestra, Benny Carter's orchestra, and Cab Calloway's orchestra. In 1940 he was noticed by Duke Ellington, who took him into his orchestra. While he was with the Duke Ellington Orchestra, he performed on several notable hits like Cottontail, All Too Soon, In the Wee Small Hours of the Morning, and more. So while he was performing with the Ellington Orchestra, Ben Webster developed a style that he would be known for, a soft, breathy playing style on love songs. Then he left the Ellington band in 1943 and started touring in New York City. Some of his collaborators included Raymond Scott, John Kirby, and Sid Catlett. Also toured with the Jazz at the Philharmonic Orchestra for a while. In the 50s, he had another stint with Art Tatum. Around this time, his saxophone style became widely popular and inspired several other artists of his time like Archie Shepp and others. In 1957, he had a TV appearance alongside the legendary Count Basie and Billie Holiday on the TV show And Then There Were None. They performed a beautiful cover of the classic Fine and Mellow. In the late 60s, Ben Webster took up touring in Europe for a while. He also spent his time touring alongside Joe Williams, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, and others. Ben Webster died in 1960, leaving behind a legacy as a great educator and saxophonist in jazz. Following his passing, the Ben Webster Foundation was put up in his honor as a tribute to Ben Webster and to support jazz in Denmark. So that was a quick insight into the biography of Ben Webster, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Ben Webster, his life and times and best hits. Now it's time for some trending contest news. The 7 Virtual Jazz Club is a jazz club dedicated to furthering the development of jazz around the world. Well, this year there's a great new contest underway, open to entries till the 30th of October. Basically, if you're an upcoming jazz musician, all you need to do is send in a video performance of yourself performing a song including original compositions, and you stand a chance to win an array of awards. Prizes include the chance to tour at an international jazz fest and more. There's both jazz and non-jazz categories for contestants. In the jazz category, the performance criteria include avant-garde jazz, cool jazz, blues, bebop, and more. In the non-jazz category, it's electro swing, R&B, classics, and more. So this is a great chance for upcoming jazz artists to showcase their skills to the world. For more information, please visit contest@7virtualjazzclub.net. And that was some trending contest news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Ben Webster's best albums of all time. Stay tuned. And welcome to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Ben Webster, his life and times and best hits. And during this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up during this hour. The first album is called Soulville, released in 1958. This is a must-have for Ben Webster fans. The styles are all varying, but the playing of Webster's saxophone puts everything in a consistent mood. Also, there's instances of the styles that influenced him, from the saxophone styles of Coleman Hawkins to Lester Young's melodiousness. The Consummate Artistry of Ben Webster was released in 1954. Ben Webster wasn't just a great saxophonist, but also a great theorist. One of his theories went on to shape the face of jazz, and this album is one example. It's based on his innovative ideas in saxophone playing, a very emotional, soulful album of ballads. Ben Webster Meets Oscar Peterson, released in 1959. This is a great album compilation featuring duets with Oscar Peterson, another jazz legend of his time. Peterson weaves through Webster's saxophone playing, and the result is magical. And King of the Tenors, released in 1954. So Ben Webster was at his best with ballads, and this album showcases this. So that was a quick recap of what's coming up during this hour, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, Ben Webster, his life and times and best hits. And during this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. The first one's called Soulville, released in 1958. So imagine you're on a train journey, and while the train is moving, you know that feeling of drowsiness you get? The best word to describe it is a certain mood. In this album, Soulville, Ben Webster does exactly that. He gets his audience into a certain mood. Not one that swings or rocks, it's just a mood that keeps you hooked on and on. A sweet, romantic mood. Ben Webster speaks through the music, holding you in sway. Also, Ben Webster was famous for his saxophone playing. His saxophone playing had the distinctive sound to it, and that's one of the highlights of this album. And yet, despite the overall mood, not all the songs are the same. There's definitely up-tempo catchy tunes like Late Date, slow dance-paced ballads like Time on My Hands. So this album is a great jazz ballad album, also a great tenor saxophone compilation. There's also instances of the various styles that influenced him. There's an intensity of Coleman Hawkins' theme mixed with Lester Young's melodiousness. Also backing him on the album is the Oscar Peterson trio. They take us from bluesy songs like Late Day to the title track Soulville. Both these songs were original compositions to beautiful ballads. The next album is called The Consummate Artistry of Ben Webster, released in 1954. So it was a time when jazz was evolving. Various theories and stereotypes about the music format were being developed. This album is one example. It's based on several of Ben Webster's ideas that would go on to define mainstream jazz. So this album is many things. It's got that Dixieland feel to it. It's like Ben Webster is on stage pouring his heart and soul out to his loved ones through the music. It's very much in the style of late night jazz, swinging and enchanting. Mainly the album is a compilation of ballads beautifully performed. The next album is called Ben Webster Meets Oscar Peterson, released in 1959. So there's many albums themed after topics like philosophy and so forth, and this album is one example. It's based on the theme of bringing peace to a broken mankind. And joining Ben Webster on this record is the great Oscar Peterson. Together they thresh out some beautiful vintage tunes like In the Wee Small Hours of the Morning, one of the highlights of the album. The magic is in Webster and Peterson's duets. Peterson swings in and out of Webster's performance, synchronizing with and building on it. And an album called King of the Tenors 1954. This was Ben Webster's debut album, and Ben Webster was certainly king of the tenor saxophone at his time, and this album showcases that. He was adept at connecting with the audience, soothing them with his beautiful music. And the 11 tracks on this album are a testimonial to that talent. One just listens to the music enthralled as he takes us through a bunch of beautiful cool jazz ballads. Also collaborating with Webster on this album are a star-cast lineup. There's everybody from Oscar Peterson to Benny Carter to Ray Brown and more. So that was some insight into some of Ben Webster's best albums of all time, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, Ben Webster, his life and times and best hits, and now it's time for some trending album news. Terry Gibbs is a leading jazz vibraphonist. He's performed alongside Benny Goodman, Mel Torme and others. And there's a new CD release featuring some of his best performances from the 50s. It's called Terry Gibbs The Lost Tapes 1959. And it's going up for grabs for the very first time on Wailing Records on October 11th. The compilation features some great tracks from two Hollywood performances in 1959. So the story goes that Gibbs was looking for some material to compile into a new album, and he came across one that he had overlooked called 1959 Jazz Party. So these performances turned out to be ones that he had performed alongside the Dream Band from the late 50s. He performed alongside a star-class setlist of musicians from Bob Brookmeyer, who sings on the track Don't Be That Way, Al Cohn, who sings on Cottontail, Med Flory singing on the classic Flying Home, and more. There's also some great solo performances from the Dream Band. Trumpeter Conti Candoli scintillates on the song Bright Eyes and Moonglow, trombone melodies from Carl Fontana on Let's Dance, and there's Mel Lewis thrilling with drum melodies on No Heat. So it's a great chance to obtain some great Terry Gibbs performances. For more information, please visit www.terrygibbs.net. And that was some trending album news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about more of Ben Webster's best albums of all time. Stay tuned.